There we go.
Let's go ahead and call the Monday, November 21st meeting of the Historical Preservation Board to order. Let's go ahead and have roll call. Who's going to take roll call?
Commissioner Clute? Here. Commissioner Field?
Here.
Commissioner Grove?
Here.
Commissioner Kastner? Commissioner Miller? Commissioner Price?
Here.
Commissioner Lady?
Here.
Did I say it wrong?
Leidy. It's okay.
Leidy, I'm so sorry.
It's all right.
And Commissioner Spratlin?
Good. Here.
Thank you. Do we want to go ahead and approve the agenda as is, or is there any additions or deletions? Okay. Should we all go ahead and approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let's go ahead and approve the minutes of the September 28th meeting. Is there any discussion on that? If not, you want to go ahead and...
Move we accept the minutes. Here, proposed motion. I'll read that, Margie, thank you. I move to approve, based on the recording secretary's certification, the September 28th, 2016 video as the minutes for the September 28th, 2016 regular meeting of the Historical Preservation Board.
Second?
Second.
Okay, so moved. Okay.
Aye.
Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we won't have public comment at this point because we don't have any general business. And we'll go ahead and have the public hearing on the resolution of the adoption of the Louthan Heights Historic District Design Guidelines. And let me get my sheet out here.
Great. If I can get the screen, please. Great, thank you. So this is a public hearing on the Louthan Heights Historic District Design Guidelines. You've had several study sessions on this. You had a joint session with the Planning Commission. And so we're doing more outreach with the neighbors. We asked for additional comments at the joint study session, got those. We've incorporated the comments that you had at the joint study session into the current draft, which we sent out to you. And we also have some additional comments that came in since then from one of the neighbors, and I'll pass those on to you as well. And we can go through those. The question tonight is, do you recommend as a board the design guidelines to be adopted by Planning Commission? Planning Commission by code has the authority to adopt the all design guidelines for the city. So that's the question for us. It needs to be decided. What I want to do is just quickly go through for the people at home who may not have seen the design guidelines, might not have seen the process before or in the meetings, just quickly what the design guidelines are and what they cover. So this is the Louthan Heights Historic District. It's just north of Littleton Boulevard, just west of Windermere. There it is, the houses. It's a small district. It's the first historic district in the city, and it was created after a petition by the neighbors to city council to actually create a historic district. They did the work themselves. And since then, we've been talking about design guidelines. The neighbors have been asking for design guidelines since day one, and we finally were able to get a grant from History Colorado through the CLG program to hire consultants to do the design guidelines for us, and had a really good working relationship with them and really helped that. And we were pleased with the consultants that we had and the work that they've done. It's Abigail Chrisman and Melanie Short were the two, architect and architectural historian. A lot of experience in doing design guidelines, and we're able to work with the neighborhood well and put together, I think, a document that's very useful. And I think with the comments that we've had, we can make it even more useful. So, but we do have some things that we need to think about in terms of, are these things you want to approve, or things that changes you want to approve, changes you may not want to approve. So we'll go through those. So as we've said before, what the consultants do is they're working with neighbors. They ask questions. What do you love about your house? What do you love about the neighborhood? What frustrates you? What are the issues that you've had over the time? And what things would you like to change about your house? And there's a lot of consistency, I think, among the residents in terms of the things that they'd like to expand the house in certain ways. There are issues always with maintenance in terms of how do you actually maintain the property. And then what issues do you have with maintenance and or materials? So we started getting into some details. When we talk about district resources, they were looking at each of the houses. They did a pretty detailed explanation of each of the houses in the district, went through, and all of those are actually in the design guidelines themselves. Photographs, and then Matt Wilson of the neighborhood actually provided additional photographs for us too of the garages that we'll include in the draft if you approve that. And so we look at the house and then the garage, and there's an explanation of what it is. The question, what are design guidelines? What do they actually do? Because design guidelines, I think there's a lot of confusion in terms of what's the design standard, what's a design guideline, when do you use these, how effective are they, and what can they actually accomplish? And it's always the thought that they can't, reverse something and make something absolutely fantastic if, that's not where it's going. But they certainly can stop things from happening that may do harm to the historic district or to a house, a historic character. And so that's what they're really aims at doing, is trying to provide as much guidance and direction as possible, not only to the people who live there now, but also to the city and city inspectors and to realtors and potential buyers who really have used the design guidelines to say, here's something I want to look at, here's something I'm interested in. And we've had new buyers even since the design guidelines have been developed, have been looking at those and seriously considering how did they use them to modify the house that they're looking at. So it's really useful, I think. Defining features, what is that for the district? And we look at what's unique about the district as well as what's unique about the individual houses. But they look at the siding and they cite the form, the style. A lot of consistency in this district. A lot of the houses were developed by the same person, Charles Louthan, and built them himself. But a lot of them were built at the same time. They were all built in this fairly short period of time, and so they all are kind of this craftsman style. Some different materials. A lot of them are the stucco. Some of them are not stucco. But you look at the roof forms. You look at the characteristics of craftsman architecture, and these houses have them. They're great examples of them. Standards for rehabilitation. So we follow, every time we look at the design guidelines, we follow the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation, and that's what we used before we had design guidelines. It's really broad parameters for what are you trying to accomplish. And it's always try and use what's there, try and save it, try and renovate it, try and maintain that. Replacement is often your last option, and if you do end up having to replace things, replace with similar materials. Try and keep the materials the same. So very standard rules that kind of go throughout all design guidelines, all historic preservation. But with these, we're able to narrow it down to what's important to these specific houses. What are the characteristics that they need to know about? What are the issues the neighbors had? So the design guidelines actually go above and beyond what typical design guidelines where they go in terms of providing some little additional information. For example, we do not review, the board does not review, staff does not review, our code is allowed to review color. But the neighbors are interested in what colors were used at that time, what colors should be recommended. So the design guidelines include things like that. We talk about driveways. We talk about things that aren't necessarily things that we can look at during the COA process, the Certificate of Historic Appropriateness review process. But they are things that are important to the neighbors and do make a huge difference in terms of the character of the neighborhood. So these are, I think, good basic things that I think each of you has a copy of this in your notebooks, and it's a good thing to review periodically. And then again, district patterns, and again, the setbacks of the houses. A lot of consistency of the setbacks, a lot of consistency in terms of what the front yards are like, a lot of consistency of what the backyards are like, and where the garages are, where the driveways are, where the porches are. You look at the houses and you see a lot of similarities. So that starts creating these patterns. And then the design guidelines go into what's appropriate to do, what's not appropriate to do. So do respect the neighborhood scale and massing. Do retain the original building setback. Do retain an open front yard. Do not add fencing in the front yards because nobody has them. That's not the pattern that's there. Don't add decks or other encroachments in the front lawn space. So it's really kind of picking up on what the character is now, what it has been, and what's appropriate, and what some I think people may think about doing, and what would work and what would not work, and how might you make that work. So, and the characteristics of what's in the design guidelines, we've got roofs and chimneys, we've got walls, we've got porches, doors and windows, landscaping, sidewalk and driveways. And again, those are not addressed. It's not something we can review, but it's something the neighbors want to have some direction on. Garages and accessory structures we do review. Expansions and additions. And this is a big issue for people in terms of if, like a lot of the neighbors, they'd like to have an expanded master bedroom, they'd like to have maybe an expanded kitchen. How do you do that? And typically, in all historic preservation, we say if you can build to the rear of the structure, the front facade is always the key. What do you see from the public right-of-way? What do you see from the street? And so the more you can build on the back, the more effective it is, the more compatible it's going to be with the character, maintaining that streetscape that is so important, I think, to the character of the district itself. And then tips for designing compatible addition. They get into how do you do that? What do you think about first? And then they get into great detail in terms of expansions and additions, basements, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. It's amazing how much detail goes into thinking about what you do when you have an older home that's in a historic district and what changes you might want to make over time. Aging in place, and how do you do that in an older home when you're talking about a ramp or you're talking about wider doors? How does that work? So there's some direction for that. Sustainability. Sustainability is actually something that is being woven more and more into historic preservation efforts and into design guidelines because it's such a key thing. And certainly the most sustainable policy is retaining what we have built instead of demolishing and building new. So sustainability is a key, but how do you make these even more sustainable in terms of heat conservation, in terms of electrical, bringing your systems up to speed? So how do you do that? Repair and replacement. This is talking about specific architectural features, getting into more details, wood, and then the pebble dash stucco, which is not all houses in the district are pebble dash stucco, but it's a great material that is unique in terms of each pebble that is used, each stone that's used for each house is unique. And so the challenge is where do you find those stones and how do you actually repair that stucco? It's a tough one to do. So it takes some expertise. One of the things we couldn't do was actually talk about specific contractors, specific people that can do these repairs. And it's too bad. We could provide just a general list of people, but it's not vetted. And Historic Denver has done that. They have a general list, but again, theirs is not vetted. So that it's not as beneficial as one might hope. We can't recommend anybody with anything for the city. So it's more word of mouth is kind of the way it works with most historic districts. People say, ask their neighbors who they've used for a specific repair. And it's a very good way to go, but unfortunately that cannot be in the design guidelines themselves. So that's it for that. I'm going to go through and look at the changes, unless you have questions about that first part.
Any questions for Dennis? I guess not.
None here, Pam.
Bring up the document itself, if I can figure out where I am here.
I do have a question before you get started on the
Okay,
next part,
great.
and maybe you're going to address it, you probably are, but I'm just trying to figure out, we have two documents. We have the actual design guidelines, and then we have the compilation of the recommended changes and comments.
Right.
So the compilation of recommended changes and comments, are they incorporated already into
Yes, they are.
documents?
Those are the ones that are
Okay,
incorporated
that's what
into
I
it.
thought.
They are.
So everything that's on here has been added here.
The only thing that's not been added there were new comments I got today. So, and I put those into a new compilation, and I have them on here and go through them. There aren't very many, but I think they're comments you'd like to hear. So,
Okay, that's good. Okay, so that makes sense. All right.
there we go. So this is not a PowerPoint. We'll just go through this. So one of the comments was, and we've had, Pam has gone through and noticed some just editorial things that we need to be changing as well. So I appreciate that. So if anybody else has any, that'd be great.
And I can
boxes.
list those for the board.
I'm sorry?
I can list those for the board.
Okay,
But,
that'd be great.
the board may have other comments, so why don't we wait and do that after you
Okay.
present yours?
Okay. So one of the comments, the first comment we got, and this is from the neighbors, was it'd be very helpful to go through and just expand on the table of contents. So that's an easy thing to do. So we will do that. We'll go ahead and just put in each of the categories so it's more useful so people can find each of the subcategories, because there's an awful lot of subcategories in here, a lot of information that is kind of lost in there otherwise. So I think that's something we can do easily if the board agrees.
When you do that, Dennis, could you number each page
Yes.
distinctively instead of having a 56B, for example?
Right.
And make sure that those even if they're numbered, where it says context, page 22, make sure that that page is numbered. I mean, if it's 22, that's great,
Right.
but.
Yeah, absolutely. Want to do,
Just for ease of the reader.
Yeah, we're not sure where those went because they were there originally and they disappeared, but we'll get those back in for the final draft, definitely.
Okay, great.
Dennis, on the comment WM1, what is WM1 and DS2? What are those referenced to?
DS2 is me, Dennis Swain.
Oh, that's Dennis Swain.
And WM1 is from the neighborhood, so all
Okay.
those.
Thank you.
And then one of the comments also, and they're in different places here, the district was created at the request of the majority of the homeowners who went before city council and petitioned for its creation in 2004. It was a requested addition. An edit down below, in the 12 years since the creation of the district. Changed, they want to be more specific for the time frame. And then we have, this was something the board recommended in blue. Those are your comments. So you said we should delete this, and so we've deleted the addressing of the comments received was beyond the scope and time frame of the project. So we actually removed that and just said, that was not done. So we just took out that phrase. And then you have additional comments here. So this was from the neighborhood, and it makes perfect sense. Somehow, when we did the survey from the neighbors, we got both small bathrooms and tiny size of bathrooms. So that's easy to delete one of those, I think. Okay, and then the neighbors recommended expanding on masonry. So qualified exterior work includes masonry, including chimneys, but excluding flat work, which is true. We don't do driveways, sidewalks, or patios. So. Map of the district.
Can you, I'm struggling to
Okay, I'm
follow
sorry.
with you.
You have what I have, Pam. I think Margie has the one that has the
Oh, we don't have
printed
the
on the
right one.
back side. Mine's the same as yours. Mine,
Oh, yours didn't get,
I only have every even numbered page.
Oh, we don't have the right
you
one.
want to share?
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, were those the ones that were at the desk?
Yeah, they,
I'm sorry, I didn't check those when you
I
made
was
them.
struggling.
Sorry.
Okay,
Can you both see?
yeah.
Sure.
You want to go back or no?
No, I just want to know where
Okay,
I am.
I apologize. I didn't check those before they went out.
Well, I know, but I wonder if he was going to
Oh.
address this. When is the COA required? Did you address that?
When is
Oh,
this
all
here?
right,
There
we're
we
getting
go.
there now.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
I need one.
Michael. Ah,
So I see there's a typo here, but the comment was, apologize. Thank you.
okay, this one, Patty. Recycle.
Good. Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks, Mike. So one of the comments from the neighbors was in the box at the left, the addition or alteration of swimming pools, hot tubs, or spas, air conditioning condensers, swamp coolers, HVAC, and they said, and solar units, and apologize for the typo there, antennas, satellites, someone added, and solar units.
So their comment regarding the flat work over here, are you addressing that? Concerned about that.
Yeah, would you want to read that, Margie?
On page 13, the comment.
The comment about the COAs and flat works being excluded.
Flat work, we will lose the few remaining 3 historic examples of ribbon driveways. They seem to be concerned about that.
Yeah, there is concern about it. And the way the code is set up, that's not in the purview for the staff or the board to review. So that's something that we have in the design guidelines, so it's a voluntary thing. And when the inspectors go out, we're going to try and educate them to that being desirable for this district. But right now, there's absolutely no control over that. We don't do patios that are at grade. We don't do sidewalks. We don't review any of those things. We don't do retaining walls. And there's always a question about some of those things and how much impact do they have. We might think about that maybe a change to the code if it's a significant enough issue. We might go through and see. And I don't know if other districts actually do review those things. I wouldn't be surprised that some don't because it's such a critical part of the urban fabric.
Yeah, and it seems like if we lose a lot of that, that's an exterior, kind of a streetscape issue.
Right, absolutely. We also don't do landscape. We don't, look at the trees. We don't do a lot of things that we don't do. But it is important to think about those things. So,
Yeah. So what will happen with the comments, Dennis?
What I'd like the board to do is, if there are some that you don't agree with, remove those and say, okay, I want to approve all the comments except for these. So we have a sense of what you want to go forward with to Planning Commission. Here's the document with these changes proposed. And we will add those as a separate document and take them forward to Planning Commission. Like you have, you'll have one that shows the track changes, shows the information, plus a summary of all that. There's no ideal way to show this, unfortunately. If we incorporate it into the document itself, that assumes that you've accepted all those, you agree with all of them. So it's best, I think, to have that initial document intact and then go forward with the changes that you recommend. So.
Okay.
Okay, so basically the flat work is not.
Flat work, currently, the code does not cover that. We do not review that.
Nothing we can do about that. Okay.
So it can't be in the design guidelines then, right? Because it would be contrary to code. It can't be.
No, we've got it in the design guidelines as a voluntary thing. We have paint colors, we have some things that are not addressed. But again, they're voluntary. So.
Right, okay. So they can be in there so people can understand. So this concern is somewhat met by, if you look at the design guidelines and say, well, maybe I should have this checked out to make sure that it continues to have, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they don't have to fix
They
it
don't have to
before
come
they get a
through us.
permit.
Right.
Or come through
Right.
us or anything.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's right.
Is it dealt with on page 49 then, Dennis? Landscaping, sidewalks, and driveways?
Yes, yeah.
It is,
That's
okay.
where it's addressed, yeah.
So there is a guideline in there.
There's guideline, yeah, that addresses that. Yeah.
It's not required, but it's a guideline.
Right.
I missed that. Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Okay.
So this talks about application submittals. How do you apply for a COA? So there's a little bit of background on that. And talking about one of the issues that they've really had is the vents. There's a real push, I think, just because you're looking for efficiency with when you go in and replace your fireplace or your furnace or your roof. Often the code requires that you have additional venting. There are ways to do that, which is appropriate. That's something that the guidelines address, and we'll be addressing more with the inspectors too, how to do that. And so we want to give a heads up to the residents. Here's what we prefer: that the bridge vents work well. These individual vents coming up are not consistent with the character. So. Page 18. One of the comments, too, Pam had was that we have an awful lot of photographs. It'd be nice to have a little bit more identifying text that says, this is a great example of, look at this, particular specific architectural feature, whatever it might be. And I think that's a great comment that we go ahead and add more caption to the text of the photographs. The glossary, one of the comments that the Planning Commission had was they'd like to have additional definitions, more detailed. So we have the photographs pointing and an arrow pointing to what these things are, but I've gone ahead and prepared draft definitions for each of them. So there are definitions that I've added to it. It may be something you want to change a little bit, that's fine. But anyway, those are fairly standard definitions for those architectural features.
I think those are good, Dennis.
Okay, oh, great, thank you.
Do you define a muntin in here anywhere?
I don't think it is defining. That's a good thing to define, Mike.
Because a muntin and a mullion are two
it
separate
does,
things.
absolutely. Yeah, muntins and mullions.
look that
I
up.
like that. Yeah.
Differentiate.
Right.
Right. And the other thing, could you explain the difference between a cross gable and a clipped gable?
No. I can't.
I couldn't figure it out either.
Architect, one of our architects.
Remind me, Dave?
I can make some assumptions here that
Okay.
the cross gable is its location along that roof line. So it's crossing that roof line along the long linear portion.
The side one, would that be
Yeah,
a
so
cross gable?
it's both a cross and a clipped gable.
Okay. And what makes it clipped?
I would assume it's the openness of it at the ends. Instead of being like a pitch there at the end, it's open and the rafter tails extend there, that edge of the eave line.
So the clipped gable is more like a Dutch hip on the front of this house. And that's I'm just having a hard time with the distinction between the two.
Yeah, I think we need some further clarification on that.
Yeah, I agree.
That's about the only one I couldn't figure out, Dennis.
May I ask a question? So on the side of this, in the salmon color, it looks like we're adding some of those definitions?
Correct. Those
Do
are
they say a
definitions.
comment? So is that meaning that, because there is a definition on the side for both of those?
Those are definitions that I put in. So salmon is staff color.
So is the intention that those comments will just turn into definitions
The definitions of the board.
that will remain on that
The board
side?
accepts them, yes, exactly. Because they were requested, so at some point we need to do those. And I thought I should bring back specific language to the board.
So it appears that on
requested
that
by the Planning
page,
Commission.
it appears on that page, then you've listed a definition for cross, clipped, and all the other items that are in salmon.
Right.
Just FYI for the board.
So this is not final then?
No, it's
Page is
not.
not, we have to
Right.
make more changes.
Yeah, you would accept those and we would provide, figure out how to actually format that so we can get those. So it's clear as to what those things
So
are.
on this page, then, we're asking the board if they want to add these definitions
That's
of
correct.
those terms,
That's right, absolutely.
as shown on there.
And that's true with all the comments. We're asking the board if you want to add these this additional language. So, Kim,
I don't think
you
there's
have,
been any.
you have a question.
Any exceptions so far, right?
No.
Up until this point.
So your definitions, you had to get somewhere.
Yes,
Did you get them out of,
I got different sources, actually.
oh,
Yeah,
you got
yeah,
different
so-
sources, and we'll
right.
leave it to our architect to make sure everything is correct.
Okay, so that'll be a reformat page. Okay.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. That's great.
Okay.
Okay. So there are more on the second page, same thing. A lot of repetition here, so we might be able to get rid of some of that repetition of terms. This one, again, the salmon is our comment. And the comment was include the photographs of the garages. And we have said we can do that. One of the neighbors, Matt Wilson, actually has provided photographs for each of the garages, so we can include those in the design guidelines. So that there'll be a record of that as well. So, we have another comment which starts now, and that is, which with each of these houses, the design guidelines have a list, a couple of sentences, or at least one sentence that talks about alterations that have been made to that house from the original. And one of the neighbors commented that he had left reading these descriptions with a kind of negative impression of the district, that he's talking about these alterations that should not have been made, that weren't good alterations. I was wondering if that's really necessary to have that discussion, because the design guidelines talk about future changes. That's what they're direction is, and there are do's and don'ts in terms of what to do, what do not do. And is it necessary to go through and say this neighbor's house did this neighbor did that? And he said, and his thought was, if the board does decide to keep those descriptions of the house, the alterations that have been made, that he would prefer to at least we have some sense of, in some cases, where the dramatic ones, at least identify that those alterations were made by a previous owner. That's nothing that the current owner has done. There's a little sense of perhaps if somebody feeling like they're being accused of something they didn't do. So interesting thought for the board, I think, in terms of, is this necessary? Is it appropriate? Is there a way that we can do it differently? And general thoughts, because we could cover this entire section, because they're in every description of every house.
So the question is whether we should worry about the alterations that have already been
Correct.
done.
Correct.
As we're going forward.
And we had the discussion last week at the joint study session, to some degree, with those boxes which went through. And it was confusing as to what those little gray boxes were, but the boxes were intended to say, these are alterations that have occurred in the neighborhood that may not be consistent with the design guidelines. Garages have been expanded differently than they should have been. Things have happened. Things have been built in the front yard that should not have been built. That type of thing. But it was confusing as to the way they were labeled. So the recommendation was to delete those. We went through and looked at each of those and said each one of those things is covered by a do or a don't in the design guidelines themselves, and so I'm not sure it was necessary. And again, it's things that were done badly, but is it useful to point those out and necessary to do that? So,
Well, my thought is to delete the alterations. I don't see that there's a purpose for that in here. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but.
I kind of agree with you, but I also feel if there's a general caveat statement at the beginning saying that none of these houses meet every guideline, or they all contain some sort of pre-existing alteration, would just be a helpful to, you see these pictures, visually you don't assume that this is a perfect example, and you say this is what I want, and you point at, particular elements. Just some general statement maybe to
General statement that would cover
baseline that.
I'm kind of for keeping the changes in, so you know what's original and what is not. It's very easy to go by as a homeowner and say, oh, I'm not supposed to enclose in my porch like they did at X, Y. Oh, okay, I'm not going to do that. So you understand what you're not supposed to do.
okay.
And you can see, this is an example of somebody that made a change that was not in compliance to the historical flavor of the district or the house. I don't know what the rest of you guys think.
I don't think it's necessarily pejorative or condemning of what's happened. It is what it is. And I think it's helpful to say, okay, alterations on 5608 include the front and rear porch with attached deck, metal storm security door. And those are the kinds of things we're trying to avoid. And I think if you look at that and you say, okay, that may be something that we would like to not duplicate in the future. But I don't think it's necessarily, meant to be, a slam against the owners of the home.
Okay, good.
Because they may have not done it. It may have been a previous owner.
That's right. In a lot of cases, it was a previous owner. That's correct.
Another question that kind of goes with that, for example, 5677, that house no longer retains its historic designation.
That's not correct.
That's not correct?
No, it's not. And I think what the neighbor was trying to say perhaps was it has lost its historic character or something, but each of these houses is a contributing structure within the district. None of them are individual landmarks. So every house retains its historic designation in terms of being a contributing property within the district.
Okay.
So even with the alterations, nothing has changed in terms of their significance or how they're approached, how they can approach tax credits or anything else.
So from here on out, that house would still be considered a contributing structure and be subject to these design guidelines? Okay.
Absolutely. And then the thought is, as other changes are made over time, they will meet the design guidelines, and perhaps some of the changes can actually be either altered or improved. Some things you can't undo, but some things you can certainly make some changes to. So.
Okay.
So Ted and Kim, do you want to weigh in on keeping the changes in, or?
I feel like I have two comments. One is I tend to agree that it's not a problem to point them out, because you're not, as long as your language isn't judgmental, it's you can say this is not, consistent with the design guidelines, this previous alteration. And as a writer, this absolutely hurts my soul to say, but people don't always read. And they see photographs and they think, oh yeah, enclosed porch, we're good,
Good point. Okay.
Nothing really different. I think it's good to have them. I'm a visual person, so I think something to point out that's actually not the way to alter the home.
Okay.
To maintain,
Great. David?
Perhaps to alleviate some of those concerns the neighbors have, having that kind of preface to this of the fact that these alterations may not be by the current owner, or to some extent that it's an existing condition and not that it's condemning what they've done.
Okay, good. I like that.
So our consensus is that we leave in the changes.
Good.
Do we need to vote on that or anything, or?
No, I think you want to do a motion at the end in terms of, you kind of keep track of anything. But if you're not changing anything, if you're keeping what's here, it doesn't need to be addressed. It's just anything you want to change that is currently in here, so.
We'll go through all the changes that we're suggesting as we go along. Like Mike had a couple, and I'm kind of writing them down.
And the neighbors also went through and provided a little bit more direction in terms of the color of the different aggregates. So for each of the descriptions, talked a little bit more about some additional changes that have been made. True for each of these.
Dennis, on 5677, then, to Mr. Price's point here, is that statement true, the last?
No.
It's not?
It's not correct, no.
Okay, so that will be straight, okay, we're not going to get that.
Absolutely. So that's one thing.
Part of the final product.
If you include that in your motion, I think that's one thing we need to change. So, again, each of these has more description in the purple. And one of the things that was, I think, said at the Planning Commission, HPP, was shutters at the front window. Apparently there are no shutters at the front window anymore in this house, or something that's something that was recommended to be removed. And the neighbors can speak to this more too, so if these are correct or incorrect. So, okay. There's also one in here, and I didn't see it as I was going by, but there's only one that actually talks about the dates of the changes. And I just for consistency, I would think we would remove that probably.
Yeah, there was one that says 2016, I noticed.
Right. Yeah. So I think that
It's the second one.
okay.
5618 on page 22.
Okay. Getting closer. Okay.
Yeah, right there.
That one. Okay. Yeah, 2015. Okay, good. Thank you. So it's the only one that says that. So again, I think we were just talking about it. It was replaced, but we don't give dates for any of these. And again, I think to Pam's point, I think the more we can have captions for each of these photographs, the more interesting and more useful the guidelines will be. So.
And also, before you leave 5618 on
Okay.
page 22, it looks like the window surrounds should be one word.
Okay.
There's a lot of those little typos, I know.
Yeah, there are, absolutely. And I think what happened was the format in going from a PDF to Word, some of these things got thrown off, but yeah, we will, yeah, so some of them I have found and corrected, but I haven't found them all, so I'll, I will keep looking for all of those, thank you.
You wouldn't have an M dash.
I think we'll need to do a final proof after all the changes.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, and then it looks like, you know, on wooden fence somehow or other, the font changed for some reason, so the whole spacing changed on it. And
I think that it really, it needs a good proofread, which is different than a group sitting around looking at it. It needs somebody who can actually proofread.
Okay, good.
'Cause there's a lot of dashes that are now M dashes and.
Good. We have a couple people in-house who are very good at doing that for us,
Excellent.
which is
Yeah.
great. So,
And
yeah.
spacing and
Yes,
capitalization and,
Right.
And spaces.
Let's see, we are now on page 29. And character defining features, again, just more description added by the neighbors. And then we got down to the boxes. This is the first of our boxes. And the thought was non-compliant alterations just did not tell the story in terms of what these are. So these are changes that have been made that would not comply with the proposed design guidelines. It does not say they cannot be done, and I think that was part of the confusion. The one on the garages particularly was confusing because you can expand your garage. There are ways to do it. And so it's very possible, and we encourage that. You know, people need that to work with us to do that. So it's possible. This one, front yard, again, front yard planters, again, that's nothing we review, but it's something that is not consistent with the design guidelines because historically there weren't things in the front yard. So front yard fencing, and I'm not even sure if all of these have occurred, or these are just things that they've seen in other districts. I think it may be a combination of the two, and I can check with them as well. But it seems like these are things they've seen that may occur as well as things that have occurred.
So do we want to talk about the boxes?
Sure.
Those gray boxes that they have throughout, I guess there's a consistency issue and then there's a redundancy issue is what you're saying?
I think it's confusion more than anything. If we can come up with a title that clearly states what these are, so people don't think these are repeating the design guidelines in some form, or saying kind of a list of things that you can't do. If they are somehow, we can come up with some description for them that these are things that we've seen happen that should not, or are not considered design guidelines. It gets a little cumbersome. Non-compliant alterations, I kind of see what that means, but it's not clear, I think, on a first read, or if you're not familiar with this. So.
Well, plus you have the do's and the don'ts.
Right, we have the do's and don'ts already, and we think they're all addressed. And we think everything in here has been addressed. So it seems repetitious, so you're right. In terms of,
I think anything that would decrease confusion would be better, since you have the do's and don'ts are pretty clear. And then once we get the captions on these,
right,
that might
address some of this too.
Address some of these things.
Well, and if we're leaving the other alterations, I think that's
I don't know, what does the rest of the board think?
It might help as well.
No, I think the do's and the don'ts should cover it. I don't know why then we need the boxes, as long as what's ever in the boxes is covered.
Do you agree, Michael, or what do you think?
Yes, that's fine.
Ted?
I think as long as the pictures correlate, for example, on page 33, you're showing defining features, but yet we show the rafter tails with a gutter. So that's a don't characteristic, correct?
Yeah, so
we
that's.
wouldn't want to show a don't characteristic photo in a character defining feature page.
But real clear as do or do not. Yeah, okay, good. Tie it to that. That's a good point.
Ed, did you have?
I'm visual. I kind of like the boxes myself, but if they're providing confusion, then I would say, to your point, Pam, we want to obviously erase most of the confusion, as much confusion as possible, so that these design guidelines can work for its intended purpose. But to Dave's point, definitely, wouldn't want to show kind of the don'ts on a character defining page, but I kind of liked how the box kind of provides a little more explanation to someone like me that's not an architect, that says, this isn't what's supposed to be here and this is why. And if I'm a prospective homeowner, I'm going to be a home buyer, I've just bought a home, I can look at these and say, okay, that's exactly what they mean by this. I'm not going to go do this. I'm going to keep the rafter tails.
He brings up
I'm
a
not
good
going
point.
to add gutters.
The caption should probably say an example of a do or an example of a don't.
Right.
What it is we're seeing that's right or wrong.
Absolutely.
Kim, thoughts about the boxes?
Yeah, if the photos are included, there has to be some information and.
Right.
Okay, good.
So I think we're in agreement. No boxes, but captions. Okay, cool.
Good. Were those comments, was the genesis from the homeowners, Dennis, or was that kind of your editorial?
Of the boxes?
Yeah, getting rid of the boxes.
That was actually at the joint study session.
Was it?
With the planning
One of the
commission.
planning commission members.
Mentioned
Yeah,
that, okay.
it was mentioned by one of the homeowners at the study session that they were very confusing, and we
Oh, okay.
and we really couldn't even explain the box, the material in the garage box. So I think that was a good sign that it was problematic. That,
Well, anything we can do to avoid confusion, I think would be good.
I think so too.
Very good.
Again, something that's a fairly major issue and was not addressed, I think, as in such detail that the neighbors would like to see, and that was the second bullet here, talking about flashing. Be careful that flashing does not damage fragile pebble dash. And flashing is one of those things that different schools of thought, I guess, in terms of if we're building a brand new house, you would have pretty substantial flashing, and older houses didn't have flashing. And how do you make it less obvious? Because it needs to be there to protect the house. And so it's kind of a balancing act in terms of how you do that. But so I think this is a good statement as well. So. And then again, we talked about roof vents, and the neighbors thought we really should highlight that, and I agree. Roof vents should be away from street views, and so that gets into what are the alternatives to the roof vents, and that's if we can do some kind of a ridge vent instead, it really is preferable. Solar panels, again, we've had that added before.
And again, you're going to put labels on all these photos. Right?
Yes, that's the intent. Yeah. If we can't figure it out, we'll figure something to say about each photo.
I would take the photo away rather than leave it there and not
Okay,
know
if we
what
don't have
we're
anything to
doing.
say. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay. It may be a little repetitious in some cases, but
I think repetition might not be so bad as long as it's not too insulting, like it's more
Okay.
than one place. I don't know what the group thinks.
okay.
But you might, to Kim's point, you might not read one place, but you read it in another
Read
place.
another, that's true. Yeah. And again, it'd be really helpful. This is a do or a don't, but we're not quite sure what it is, so we need to.
Not sure which ones are doing
Just by
which
looking
bit.
at the photograph, we need to go in and actually label it. It could be just a description of a characteristic too, which I think it is. And the box, another box. And then the colors, and this, the comment at, I think it was at the joint study session, was that we need a little clear direction as to what this is. Again, this is voluntary, and so we need a little clearer statement that this is a voluntary guideline, this is not reviewed, it's not part of the purview of historic preservation, but neighbors did ask for direction in terms of what are appropriate colors. And so these were colors, this is a paint, set of paints that actually are from the period, so the swatches. It kind of gives you a sense. It certainly isn't the end all, but it gives you a kind of an overall sense of what colors were. Michael?
Well, Dennis, at the bottom, there's a picture of several colors, and it says Aladdin paints and lead Guaranteed. And I think we all know that lead-based paint is not allowed, but should we have a bullet point in there that
We
just
might.
makes that very clear?
Real clear that this is.
So that it doesn't look like the city's putting its imprimatur on using
lead
a
paint.
lead-based paint.
I think that's a good point, Michael.
Very good point.
And is there any way we could make these bigger? I mean, you almost need a microscope to read the colors.
Yeah, we could try. That's
Not
a good
much,
thought.
just enough. a little
Sure,
bit.
yeah, so you can read the actual colors. They always say you don't read the name of a color because it's going to throw you off completely. You'll go for something that sounds romantic and wonderful, but it's not the color.
I know this is not our purview, but do we really want somebody painting their house red?
It may not be the primary color, but I think for the period,
front door?
yeah. Well, we've seen houses. I think you look around, you see shingle houses, particularly. I think they're probably painted red. So I think for the period that we did see some, because it was kind of rustic, kind of like the red that we have down along the Platte these days for the rural vernacular. So it's not too different.
Yeah, well,
It's a real dark red. It's a rich red. So barn red, I think, Marty. How's that?
barn red.
Okay. So I did try to insert page numbers just for reference in that document, and we're not sure why they disappeared from the original, but we'll get them back.
And then this page 43 is not consistent. I think these fancy page numbers has gotten in the way.
Yeah.
Might be
Yeah,
better to do
something
the,
happened, yeah. So the numbers I have here are really just for our use for this document because they don't correlate completely,
And
which is how we end up with the B on
I
one
mean,
of
it's
them.
probably too late now, but having a page number on the inside is harder than having a page number.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's, people look for page numbers
Yeah,
and not in that place.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
And it's real designy, but
It
it's
is.
not user-friendly.
Right, and it was just a question of, I wasn't sure where they were going to end up because given the document, so I apologize. That's true. And then additional direction for wooden storm and screen doors, and talking about replace inappropriate porch light fixtures with new or vintage fixtures that match the original Craftsman or Mission design style. And some additional direction. Do not replace original front doors that can be repaired, and do not add modern storm doors. Do not enclose front porches with window screens, awnings, siding, or brick. So the more detail, I think, is helpful. Okay, there's another box. More photographs that need captions. And this is a do recock and replace window hardware. And I can't read the comment on that. Why is
It says, why do you want the window hardware replaced? Wouldn't you want to keep operating historic hardware?
Well, I would think so too. It's a good question. Yeah, I guess if it's broken or it's not operating, but yeah, I would certainly think if you could repair it, that'd be preferable. That's a good question.
Yeah,
Something we might
you could
ask.
add if necessary.
Yeah, well, we can ask the neighbors as to what the comment was. So there's a thought on that too. Do add storm windows to the interior or reinstall the original exterior wooden storm windows, or as some neighbors have done, they've actually had wooden storm windows built, custom windows, storm windows for their houses. They're heavy because they're big windows, but they're great storm windows. And do add thin profile wood or metal full light storm doors similar in size and color of existing door when a storm door is desired, or utilize historic wooden reproductions. There are good reproductions from the era.
Dennis, on that storm windows to the interior, is that really what your intent is there? To actually put a storm window inside?
Inside, and actually, yeah, it works pretty well. I know it sounds strange. It closes off the window, but the historic storm windows do too. You can't, in the winter, you have your storm windows on and you don't open, which isn't great for Colorado because we go back and forth. Right. But that, unfortunately, is the pattern. But yeah, you can add them on the interior that open, and it might actually be better than those. So, and some people have done that. And then they don't add awnings or shutters. There were no shutters on these houses. Shutters, it's a different style. So, and Typically, shutters are too small for the window. They would, if you try and close them, it's not going to cover the window. So if you add those, it's not what was designed. And then under landscaping, again, this is voluntary. We do not address landscaping, but they've talked more about, okay, who can read that? I'm sorry. It's not big enough for me.
That one says, can a listing of typical trees, shrubs, and plants common to the location and period be added to the document, say as an appendix?
Okay. And we can ask our city forester if he can come up with something. It's an interesting idea. I think it's always a challenge because there are plants that are typical of the period. It's kind of fun to have those. It's a good thought. So it'd be nice to have that in here, I think. So.
I think Russian olives were popular back then.
Russian olives were very popular. Probably true. So, let's see, what's it down below say?
Dennis, your comment on there, change the title to better reflect the intent such as do not construct. I'm not.
Oh, yeah, that was for the box itself, so that's what it's all about, so.
It's about.
It was about the gray boxes, and it's just somehow out of place. It got moved. I think it must belong down here.
So we can discard that.
Right, yeah. So rather than retitling them, we're going to delete them. Okay, again, the box goes away, and again, that's the comment box is the title. Don't install prefabricated metal or plastic accessory structures, for example, sheds. And one of the boxes talks about not installing sheds or garages, and you can do both. You can have a shed. Just there's direction, a guideline in terms of where it should be placed and what it should look like and what materials it should be. So definitely possible. All these houses, a shed would have been in place originally, so it's very, very appropriate. Does it say, Michael? Sorry.
That one says, I think photos of the recent addition at 5658 should be added here.
Oh, okay.
I will send you some for possible use.
Great, good. Thank you. I think at the scale I could read it, but for some reason I can't read it. Okay. Recommendations for common homeowner concerns.
I think some photo examples are needed here. I will send you some for possible use.
Great, good thought.
And did you receive those, or is
I have not yet, but I'll talk to Matt. He's here tonight. He's been great about sending photos and comments and material.
So if that whole thing is highlighted, are they?
I think it's because the whole section, they wanted to add photos that describe all of these is why it's highlighted.
So they want photos for everything on there, right. Is what they're saying.
And it may not be each one, but certainly try and do as many as we can, I think. Don't insulate wood frame buildings that were not originally insulated without appropriate vapor and air barriers. And this is an issue because it's tough to get those in there. You almost can't insulate the walls. To get a vapor barrier, you pretty much have to tear the walls out, which is not ideal. David's shaking his head. Barriers require removal of exterior materials, which is not recommended since significant. So the question is, there's other ways to insulate your houses. The storm windows, you can work with your doors, you can insulate your ceilings. So there are ways to insulate and improve the air efficiency of your houses.
So their comment is being addressed then?
What do you recommend? Yeah, so
what
I
can
think
we
the
recommend
alternative
in the
is
document for insulation improvements?
So, we can address that.
Can we put a recommendation in there then?
Yeah, we sure will. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the recommendation would be just look at the alternatives to that because it's such an expensive thing and cost benefit just may not be there to do that. So. Fill cracks and holes with putty and what? I think we'll get rid of the what. And the comment says, I have...
Your wood putty, I have used another product very successfully. I will send you the information.
Okay, and we had comments actually, last time from one of the members of the Planning Commission, and David and Ted may have comments on some of those alternatives too that do work, some don't work. Some actually apparently are too permeable, and so you end up with some water issues. So, David, you have thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's particular to the product, I would say.
Okay.
But yeah, to match the right properties, what you're saying.
Okay. Skin forms on the
Dennis,
putty.
did you get direction on like the and what? What is
Yeah.
that?
Are we okay getting rid of the and what? Because what that is it's there are some alternatives to that. So if we can get some, and I think that's Matt that's probably going to send me some additional information on other materials, and anybody else that has some, and we'll check too with our building inspectors and just see the things they recommend with when you're talking about stucco and you're talking about these repairs, what works and it does not create more problems. So not all materials are ideal. So okay, we will add material. We'll add some definition for that.
So this isn't saying that you fill cracks and holes with putty plus something else. This is,
Right. Or I think it's and or.
It's an
So-
either
Okay, they're
or.
alternatives,
An either
okay.
or kind of thing.
And then, let's see, I think that's just additional detail, background, local sources for purchasing rock aggregate in the correct colors and sizes is difficult, but sources include building supply stores, landscaping, hobby, pet supply, and aggregate suppliers. There are sources out there, but nothing's ideal apparently, and it depends on which house you have, so where you can find your rock. And then a comment about see Historic Denver's Pebble Dash Repair Workshop, how to reference materials correlated for the Louthan Street Historic District homeowners in 2014. So Historic Denver did come out and do a workshop in 2014 for the neighbors on the repair. So because it's a unique issue. So they also came out and did one on window repair too, so which is great.
that's the last one.
And we're getting close. That's it. So those are all the comments. Questions at this point?
Will you be adding then those definitions that we talked about? Will they be back in the terminology, or are we going to add those on the pages where you have the notes?
My thought would be to put it under terminology, if that makes sense to everybody. So I think that's the easiest kind of one-stop reference.
Right.
And get rid of some duplication too, probably, because there's some duplication that we can probably get rid of.
So
too,
not have a glossary page then?
Oh, well, no, and have the glossary page with the photographs.
And
That's what I'm
put
thinking.
those glossary terms in the terminology?
That's what I was asking, is the location of those new glossary terms, would they be back in the terminology, in the glossary itself, the
Right.
terminology section, or would they be placed where they are now?
My thought is,
within your bubbles?
So you're thinking spread out throughout, I guess I'm not clear still. Spread out.
I'm just asking, I don't necessarily know if I have
Okay.
a predilection that one is better than the other one place. I was just more kind of asking for.
My thought has been to put them under that in the glossary section where the photographs are.
Okay.
So photograph and a term, and define it there. So we have everything in one place, if that makes sense to everybody. And it seemed like that'd be the easiest. It's going to create some flipping back and forth perhaps when you hit a term, but it's still, I think, is a little simpler.
But there's two different things, like contributing, you don't need a photograph for that, but you need an explanation.
Right.
So I'm confused on what we're deciding.
I think we were talking about the architectural terms.
Right.
Under terminology?
Under
What page is that on?
So building glossaries on 20.
Building
It starts,
glossary,
it's
Marty.
2021. And then in the back is the terminology section.
Uh-huh.
So my question was simply, will the building glossary definitions be moved to the terminology versus being placed next to the pictures?
Are these definitions here?
Right.
Would they stay here, or would they go back? in
Right, well, that's the
terminology
question.
section?
Ask a question of you, what do you think would be easier to use? I mean, my thought was to put them all in that one glossary section, but we could
I think
certainly.
for the user, I
But
think
of
for the
course, these are,
homeowners, it's easy.
well, these are different though, and so maybe we need both, if that's all right. Because this is really talking more about process, and this isn't talking about architectural terminology. This is historic designation, historic landmark, so they really, I think, belong back here, whereas the architectural terms belong up with the photographs, I think. Now, we can combine them all here if you think that's easier, and then provide some photographs, I guess, in
I
in
like
this
the
as well.
photographs of these ones.
I agree with Pam. Again, visual here, visual learner, and I think it was more user-friendly to have them next to.
That's what I was going to say, user-friendly. I
Right,
think
so
it's more
leave them
user-friendly.
here only.
Whether,
but don't
duplicate
add-
them in the back if you think it's necessary, but I
Okay.
would say,
But leave them there, so
Together.
before you start the review of the individual houses, looking at the terminology, looking at the design guidelines, have them up front. Okay,
Correct.
Good.
And duplicate them in the terminology, put them in here just without the pictures?
I think Ted was saying if you think that's useful.
if you think it's useful, do it. I wouldn't say that you have to. I don't know if there's kind of a design guideline, but I would say one time's enough, and then they don't get lost in some of the other terminology, so.
And I think these are pretty distinct, yeah, I mean, when you look at them, so.
Ask the homeowners.
Well, right, that's something that they could comment on
Yeah,
too.
when we get
so
to
too.
that section.
So we'll get
The
there.
actual intended
We're
audience.
getting a thumbs up.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we want to give the homeowners time, and we've taken a lot of time going
Yep.
through this. In addition, and I can summarize real briefly what we've talked about, but I think there may be more that we want to include. So what we've come up with, Dennis, is a table of contents by category, the page numbers on the right side and on all the pages. The glossary, we're going to format it. 5677, take out the verbiage about non-contributing. 5618, take out the dates, because that was the only one that had the date. If there's dates on others, too. Okay? Captions for the photographs. And then going through there were certain page numbers, like page 41, we wanted more direction on the colors and take out the lead. 48, you're going to add plants, that's where comments. 52, add photos. 55, add photos. And one of the homeowners was going to give you those. 56 was to add some recommendations based on the comments. And 58, that whole petty issue, we're going to put the other things in. I came up with a couple quick things, and probably, I think we need to have consistent capitalization on city council, consistent capitalization on the word city. They used ampersands, there was
Yeah.
M dashes, regular dashes, so that's a proofing issue. There's a lot of spacing stuff. So in addition to those things, what else do we need to add to what we want to do with the document before we open it up to the homeowners?
I think everything that I had on my list was covered, so.
Anybody else had anything?
Well, I would just, from an editing perspective, I think it needs a copy edit, which is going to get the things like the consistent capitalization, the ampersand versus the word and it also needs an eyes-on proof.
Okay.
Where somebody actually looks at it instead of trying to use spell check or something like
Okay,
that. So
good.
those two things will, and that's at the end.
Okay, good. And we do have two people who've done that for us in the city. Kelly Nardi does a great job,
Yes.
and Chris does too, so either one. Okay.
Okay, so now it's time, do we have any other comments before we open up the public hearing to, for anybody to ask any questions or give comments? Oh, here we go.
I just have two cleanup items,
Okay.
Pam.
Okay.
On page 29, let me get to that. It says key factors to when considering exterior building changes. I think if we just delete the word to, it'd be key factors when considering building changes, exterior building changes,
Yeah, agreed.
something like that. And then later on in the document, I think it's page 50, 58, 57, page 57, it refers to a bibliography, and I don't think we have a bibliography
No, we do not.
necessarily. So maybe we just say, see references
Okay.
for a list of relevant briefs. Just so somebody's thinking, oh, I didn't get the last couple pages.
The planning commission found something in the back, and I didn't write it down, a typo. Do you remember what that was?
Well, I don't.
I think it was in the boxes somewhere because it said non-compliant. but
Oh, it was
I think
a
it was a
compliant, okay.
misspelling on compliant.
We got
Yeah,
that.
memory serves.
Anything else? Okay, and we may have more, because we'll open the public hearing, then after we close the public comments, then we can make more comments before we decide what we're going to do. Okay, so the first person that wanted to talk was Kevin.
Can you officially please open the public hearing
Okay.
at a time?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go ahead and open the public hearing where the public can talk and try to limit your comments to 3 minutes or thereabouts. Thank you. So our first comment is from Kevin. Will you give your name and your address?
Kevin Koenig, 5668 South Louthan. Limit to 3 minutes. I'm a Koenig, come on. No, I appreciate all the work that's been done on this, and it's really great. And I think it's a really valuable document that's going to help us down the road. The one issue after reading this again that I wanted to address, I'm an architect that works all over the country with lots of guidelines. And basically, I think this is a really solid document. The only thing I'd like to have you reconsider after the discussion you had earlier this evening was on the district resources and the clause, altercations made to the house, things that were done. I think this really wants to be a forward-looking document that says, here we are, we have these resources that have been here 90 plus years. Hundreds of people have lived in them over the course of time. There have been changes. Some are good, some are bad. But I think we just take this as a stopping point, say these buildings were this. We celebrate those wonderful historic features that were still there and not really focus in on the things that weren't as successful because there weren't guidelines in place. And so I'd rather have all that language struck because I don't think it's really salient. I don't think it's forward-looking. I think, and it's not necessarily accurate. My house, for example, has an enclosed porch. It says my alteration to my house didn't have an enclosed porch. Well, that's actually not true. The historic porch has always been enclosed, and you can see it in the age of the wood, the hardware, and the way the stucco comes up next to the wood. So my fear is we've made these assumptions about things that may be real or not real. There might be errors in it. And I just as soon just celebrate the positive things that have been saved, which are a lot, really, considering how old the houses are, and not really focus in on those specific things. And I know you said, well, it'd be helpful to know, but it really isn't important. What's important is how we deal with the house down the road with these guidelines and with these things. So I'd ask you to just reconsider that and have that taken out, because this is a snapshot in time. We're here now. We were back there 90 years ago. Well, let's move forward and not really focus on that. So that was my one comment, and I'm way short, 34 seconds left.
Can we ask questions? We can ask Kevin questions, right?
It's not really appropriate, but
Okay.
since you're doing this, it's just putting the commission on the spot to answer back anything that he asks, instead of stepping back and researching it before it moves forward.
Okay, so we just take his comments. Okay, all right. Anything else, Kevin?
And zero.
Okay. And that's your 3 minutes, okay. The next person that wanted to speak was Matthew Wilson.
I'm Matthew Wilson, and I live at 5627 South Louthan Street. I just had a couple of comments. I know on the discussion that you had regarding 5677, the house on page 25, one of the things I did the research and sent to Dennis was that according to the city's records, the house was built in 1940, and the document originally said unknown. In looking at the house and discussing with him, I think that is probably incorrect data. It looks exactly like the other houses that were built in the 20s. I don't know what you do when you can't go to the city records and they're incorrect, but I think that should be looked at. Also, if there's any kind of confusion over the contributing to the district and the historical designation, that's been around since the district was created, and unfortunately, that's been passed on to the homeowners, and they have never been able to apply for the tax credit from the city because we thought they were non-contributing. So I don't know how we got that backwards and have had it backwards for 12 years, but it's to their detriment. It would take a significant amount of work to convert that house back to a front entry home. So maybe it's realistic somewhere down the line with the help of a historic architect. If there was any error on Kevin's house, it was probably made by me. I was only following up in the original document when they did the survey. They didn't note alterations on every house. They only noted some. So I tried to make it consistent and fair to everybody. And if you note a fence or an enclosed porch at one house, I tried to note it where it was. So if the error was made, I apologize for that. And if it's historic, that's fine. On the other hand, I think it's important to the homeowners that live in the houses now to see what's been altered, because again, I read it from the point of view as a new homeowner. When I first came in, I made a lot of early mistakes because there were no design guidelines, and I had nothing in a document like this that showed me some of the things that had been changed over 90 years. I think that's an important part about the history of the homes, and I would hope that you might reconsider and to continue to include that in the house, because I think it's very useful for the homeowners to see what's been done. It was not written to be cast at dispersions. Again, any one homeowner or the people who changed before it wasn't meant to have a tone, and if we can clarify that, I think it's a helpful thing in the document to show what's been changed and what may or may not be historically appropriate for the homes. So, thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Is there any other public comment? Do you want to come up and say your name and your address?
My name is Tom Smithwick, and I live at 5678 South Louthan. I would probably agree more with Kevin, and in the sense that when I looked at the resource parts in there, I saw every one of them ending with negatives, and that bothered me some. However, if it's something that's significant to keep it in, I think there's another option too. And if you would, just for a moment, if you open up to page 52 in there, you're gonna see the addition that I put on my place. And it is the one on the right. In fact, I came in front of Historic Preservation back in 2011 to get approval for that. When I hear the term alteration, I see negative just in that terminology. And I don't think that when I got the approval for that addition, that it was a negative. I mean, I saw it as saying, no, we're going to make this house so that there's an integrity to the original structure. It is visible and pleasing as you look at it from the street. The addition went in with compatible material, meaning it was the stucco I was using, and that's lap siding. But when I hear alteration, it's like, no, nothing should have happened there. And I wonder if you can consider, if you don't want to go Kevin's route or you don't want to go Matt's route, could you just put in alterations and updates and have that terminology through the whole thing? Because that then takes into account saying, hey, not everything is negative that has happened. And I mean, while I might agree more with Kevin, consider that as a possibility.
Anything else? Anything else?
No, that's about it.
Okay, thank you. All right, then we go ahead and, sorry, ma'am.
I don't live in this district, so, but my name is Pam Chadbourne. I live a block and a half from here in District 1, and I wanted to say I'm glad that this finally happened, and it seems like a lot of work has gone into it, and that it will be a great benefit to the city, hopefully inspire new districts, give them courage to do it. I do want to say, so maybe as an outsider, if you're considering buying one of these homes, I think you would really like to know what the alterations might have been. I do not read alteration as negative. I'm sorry, I don't. I'm sorry that certain homeowners who own these homes feel that it's somehow negative. It's not. If I were considering buying the home, I'd want to know what had changed. So maybe there's a different word or something like that, but please retain the work, extensive work that's been done on the history of the home, maybe history, I don't know, something that's considered neutral by the folks who seem to be sensitive to the word. But retain the history of the home, because it's very important. These have been knocked around a bit, but if I came in, I'd want to learn by reading those what I then could do better or less good. I would learn from that. So please retain that knowledge. It's great knowledge for people who want to use it. Thanks for my consideration from outside.
Thank you. Right now, we go ahead and close the public hearing. Is that correct? Right. Okay, the public hearing is now closed, and we can continue to discuss what was mentioned here and then any other changes. So one of the big issues, it seems like, how much do we include in and how do we say it in such a way that people are informed, but it doesn't appear negative to the homeowner or that they've done those changes or somebody in the past has done the changes.
I thought, do you want to restate, Dave, what your idea was? I think it's kind of a half step between what we've heard from the neighborhood about whether or not it's a pejorative, to Mike's point, which is not the intention of outlining what the alterations are or changes, additions, however we want to term that. But I agree that I think it's helpful, the context I think the statement that I heard that I more closely agree with, or at least relate with, is if I'm looking this from, I want to buy a home in the Louthan, historic district. What do I need to do? What are examples of what I shouldn't do if I do need to make changes to the home, that type of thing. So anyway, I've gone on enough. What was I think you had a good little solution to this that kind of touches on everyone's concerns.
Yeah, I was kind of trying to bridge, I guess, the two different kind of schools of thought here on it and really provide a preface to that section to explain that these lists are not absolute, that they list some of the alterations that might have been done by previous owners or that are as a point in time, as a documented stamp, you could say, of the alterations that have currently been done. But not to say that it's a bad or it's something you should move forward with or you should remove, but at least to just indicate what that alteration means in that introduction portion of that section.
I also thought it was good, I think it was Tom that said alteration and updates. Maybe there's a way that it can be softened a little bit. Because I think updates, that's a very positive thing. If they do it right, I guess, if they go by the guidelines, right?
Excuse me, Commissioner Kloot, could you talk into your mic a little bit, please? 'Cause
sorry.
we can't hear you. Thank you.
Just briefly what I was saying, that I think the suggestion from the homeowner that we do alterations and updates might be a little softer way to do it as well.
We could put our writer here on the spot. Kim, do you have any thoughts?
I don't think alteration is a negative word.
So
I think there needs to be clarification on what does alteration mean. I think that, to me, I just read it's alteration, but does that mean we shouldn't? Is it an example we shouldn't continue with? Is it an example we are okay continuing with? There is no clarification, I guess, preface to that of what the alteration means in that context.
Mike, you haven't weighed in?
Well, perhaps it would help if we had a sentence at the top of the listing of the houses under district resources that, this, and we may be restating something that's already been stated, but that the district, or that means that the block has been in existence for about 96 years or so, and that over time changes occur, and those changes could be considered positive. They could be considered modifications, remodeling. You can take it however you want to, but they are, I'm with Kim, alteration to me is not a negative word, but I mean, I guess some of the homeowners might view it that way. In reading this document several times, I tried to look at it pretty objectively, and I read that and I thought, an alteration. Well, over 90-some years, it's going to be altered, most likely. My wife's always after me to alter things, so, so even a house we've already sold. So if it would help clarify and mollify some feelings, I think that would be fine if it's okay with everybody.
Maybe we can make this recommendation. We can do an introduction that kind of addresses the issue, and then maybe kind of reread it with a little bit of a different eye, and where appropriate, maybe make appropriate wording changes, looking at alterations, changes, updates, as opposed to changes to the historic, look and feel of this house, and now it's, doesn't look as good as it used to be before. You know what I'm saying? So, and that would require some writing finesse to do that introductory paragraph. Is that something you want us to work on, or is there somebody on staff that can do that?
Yeah, we can do it in-house.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can work on that. Thank you. And we can run it by you. So.
I think one thing that might be helpful is to think in terms of the history of these houses. As was pointed out, they've been there for nearly 100 years. And think over that time. When this neighborhood was probably 40 or 50 years old, homeowners may have wanted to freshen things up or modernize them, bring them into the norm of what houses are like today, which would have been 60 years ago or so. And tastes change. And they weren't necessarily doing bad things, and I mean, that it is what it is. I know I grew up in an old house and it was modernized over time, and some of the modernizations were good and some of them were not so good, but that's the way people lived. That's what we do to our houses. And now 100 years later, this new upstart generation is all of a sudden claiming that they want everything back to the way it was in 1920. But the reality is that this is a living, breathing neighborhood, and it's changed over time. And it may be to just kind of have one introductory sentence that just, says that, this neighborhood it's lived a long time. It's had some work done, shall we say.
You can't talk from out there. You need to come to there, if the commission says it's okay.
Do you want to reopen the, do we have to
I
reopen
have to
the public?
reopen the public hearing. So why don't we reopen the public hearing and hear from our homeowner?
Kevin Koenig, same address as before. In listening to this discussion and trying to find a balance as you are, I think maybe the statement that might make everybody happy is their changes have been made to the houses that have become part of the historical fabric of those individual houses as they are today. So that's, things were done, maybe not right, maybe they were right, maybe they weren't, but now they're part of the historical fabric as we look at the house now. Sort of a nice softer.
Going forward kind of thing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, where there's no right or wrong
right.
with an alteration that a homeowner may have made 70 years ago.
Yeah, and as you said, these are living, as an architect, I think buildings are living and breathing things, but they grow over time, and all these changes and the things that have happened to them have become part of that historical fabric of that house. And then proceeding forward, we have the guidelines to do things in a way that's more sensible and thoughtful than just, I'm going to change this window to a vinyl window or something. So that would be my kind of wordsmithing on that, to sort of soften it for everyone and just make it sound like these are living things that have changed over time, and here they are. So there's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Since the public hearing is open, does anybody else have any comments before we close it?
I know we talked a little bit about the flat work, not the sidewalks and patios and driveways, not requiring a COA. I do think that's important, though, in the sense that the design guidelines tried to stress the need for protecting the ribbon driveways and there's been 2 replacements of the curb cuts for driveway replacements. And in both cases, the homeowners had to work with the city to make sure that they designed it in the historic look rather than just doing modern code. This is the way all the other curbs in the town are like. And it was, maybe there's a way to put a comment in there that when you're doing flat work, that even though a COA is not required, that you should consider the historic nature of the curb cuts and the sidewalks and the driveways, because there's only 3 houses that even have the ribbon driveways that survive, and there have been significant alterations. And there may be other homeowners who want to change the curb cuts and things, and it would be good to keep that historic look. So hopefully they can put some notation in there in the document.
Thank you, Matthew. Anybody else want to speak before we close the public hearing again? Okay. So now we've closed the public hearing. Is there any other discussion? We've got a long list of changes.
Madam Chair, I have a suggestion.
Pardon? Yeah.
I agree with you. It does seem like there are a long list of changes that you have identified a couple times, and staff has written most of that down.
Good.
We would probably recommend that you table this so that we can take all those changes under consideration and bring you back a clean copy with that so that you can see and ensure what the changes are actually what you're intending. And then you can, from there.
Okay, and then when do you think we would see a clean copy?
We would just have to schedule based on your next meeting. It probably would, the next meeting, we have 3 cases for you, so it probably would go out to the subsequent meeting, so that would put us into January?
Okay. I personally think that's a good idea. I don't know what the rest of the group thinks.
No, I would agree. I think we've had too much discussion and too many changes to try to approve something tonight that we don't really know.
And to
what it is complete.
So do we need a motion to table the approval until we get another clean copy and then can look at it again?
Yeah, so you're tabling the item or the resolution, the agenda item, to the January meeting in order for staff to add all of the comments and all of the suggestions into the document so that we can bring you back a clean document to review.
And we don't need a motion to do that?
Well, yes, you do.
Okay. Does anybody want to volunteer a motion?
I move that we table, I don't know if, does it matter the way that go ahead. Well,
We need to table it to a date certain, and the date certain would be January 16th. That would be your meeting in January.
Okay, good.
Actually, I think that is a holiday. We will schedule for that Wednesday, 18th. Is that correct?
So it'll be Wednesday, which...
The 18th.
What did I just say, the 18th?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead.
So I move we table final recommendations of these design guidelines to January 18th until we've seen staff's, I don't know how to say that, the reflections of our changes, yeah.
I second
Probably should have
it.
been the wordsmith there, yeah.
I will second that, if nobody did.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. So I think that's a great idea. Thank you very much. So we're finished with this. And homeowners and anybody from the public is welcome to stay, but now we're going to move into our own individual projects and staff reports. So thank you very, very much for coming and your interest in ideas. Okay, so, all right, let's make sure we're on. So,
Madam Chair, can I ask a question of staff? Well, the homeowners will get to see that then as well? Is that something right, the final?
It'll have to come back for a public hearing because you'll have
right,
to...
it'll be another public hearing, okay.
Yeah, you'll have to approve or disapprove the resolution, however you guys end up deciding. in order to recommend the guidelines to planning. So it'll have to come back to public hearing again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and so the homeowners will get a copy. It will be on the website and everything. Okay.
I'll have a chance to weigh in.
Okay, good. All right, so before we move to staff comments, let's open for public comment on non-agenda items, and we have one person, Pam, that wants to speak.
I'm Pam Chadbourne. I still live a block and a half from here. So my comment is, again, I would like, Wendy, could you start the timer? Thanks. I would like the Historic Preservation Board and Planning Board and City Council to reconsider the parking incentive for the historic downtown district. And at the joint session last week, I don't think this came up, and it's a pity because to me this needs to be collaborative and cooperative in the city. But we have a parking problem downtown. I live here. I talk to my neighbors. I know each one has their own version of the impact on their home and their quality of life. But the cars that are parked in front of their homes are not theirs. They can't carry groceries in. They have an older relative who can't walk in, et cetera, et cetera. Every day, their access to their homes are impacted in a negative way by the parking problem we have downtown. That is in large part due to the waivers that we've made for a number of businesses to the tune of hundreds of parking places. This, to me, appalls me in terms of city planning. So I've heard a lot of people in a very positive way say, well, this is a great problem to have, or that it's worked. But it's time to fix it now. There's a big problem, and it's only going to get worse. In fact, we almost had a business pull out because of the parking problems. So please, Historic Preservation Board, I would like you to get an action on your agenda collaboratively with the other bodies to whatever degree that's needed, I'm sure it is, to revisit this parking incentive for being in the historic downtown district. Also, I don't feel it's important for everybody downtown to be in the district, although I realize there's some danger there. To me, this parking issue is much more important. So I thank you for listening to that. I know this is a source of problem for my neighbors. I have parking, but my community does not. And people who work downtown have nowhere to park as well. So anyway, please, let's get staff to consider alternative incentives. There are other incentives for historic preservation. There's other ones, and they work in other cities. Let's have staff research those, bring those forward. Let us talk about them and figure out other things we can use. I've heard they're just as effective, if not more, and they'll get us away from this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. All right, we don't have any other public comments, so we'll close the public hearing on that and then move to staff report.
The only thing I really have is that we will have in addition to the 3 COAs, we need to have a general business item next month as well, and I apologize. And that is the extension of grants. There's been a consistent pattern with our grantees that it's very, very difficult these days. Things are so busy, and Mike can attest to this, to get smaller contracts to do small jobs. And so the one that I know will be coming forward asking for an extension is the duplex on Alamo. They've had multiple people signing up to do the shingles on that project, and they'll come and ask for an extension of that with a date certain. It's looking good at this point that they'll have somebody, but we'll have to talk about the extension because there's a deadline that we have built in that people are having trouble meeting at this point. So we've had some good luck with some projects, and others are having a tough time. So, but it'll be on your agenda. So that's all I have.
I just have one thing. Board and commission applications will open on December 1st, and we will have actually 4 openings. Board Member Clute, you are termed this time. Michael Price, you can reapply if you so choose. And Pamela Grove, you can reapply if you so choose. And then we have the vacated seat from Sharon Gar. So we'll have 4 places, so get your friends out there and get them to apply. They'll open up on December 1st, and the applications are due on January 31st.
And where do we find those?
They're on the website. If you just type in Board and Commission applications, it'll pop up and it'll be right there.
Okay.
I have a question for Dennis. What's the status of the Littleton Boulevard survey, or how, do you know when we'd get that?
They are out photographing. They wanted to photograph while the weather was good, so they're out primarily doing photographing as well as starting the surveying. But they've been working with our GIS people to figure out, what the best way to record information is, so we have that. So they're moving along.
That's great. Do you have any estimate approximately when
we
it'll
figure
be
it's a
done?
year-long project. By the time they do all the research on all those properties, do the photographs, it's a long process, a lot of properties to do.
So when do you expect it'll be done?
Probably next fall of 17.
Okay.
It's kind of
I wasn't sure when
Maybe
they
done
started.
a little earlier, but I think that's kind of what it's fair to assume.
Do we have a meeting with City Council, a proposed date? Have we looked into that for a joint session?
I have one scheduled.
Do we have that scheduled already?
We do have a tentative date, I believe, of December 13th.
Okay, and is that tentative or is that?
It's tentative based on what we would need to meet with them about.
So given that's before our next meeting, so we need to decide on topics that we would like to discuss with them and who would be responsible for presenting. And what we've done in the past is we've kind of spread out who presents topics so they hear from as many of us as we can. So here are some of the things that we've come up with, the design guidelines, the grants, the tours and the success of the tours at Western Welcome. Ideas, maybe they have ideas of things they want us to work on. Our work plan, we're getting that really whittled down. It used to be pages and pages and pages, and now it's one sheet. Is there something that they want us to look into and bring back to them? So other agenda topics. And what do we have? We don't have that long. We have maybe 45 minutes?
Typically, I think, yeah.
We might want to talk to them about that we're working on landmark designation, because it will all have to come to them to be approved. So we might give them a heads up that we're doing that.
The West of Merit, or whatever we call it.
Yeah, the landmark designation is what I'm calling it.
Well, and also to bring up the point how we're working more with HLI.
Right.
So can I put your name on that one?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Margie?
And if you want me to talk about under that, the landmark designation and the tours,
Okay, so
I've kind of been working with them on the tours.
landmark designation.
And historic preservation awards too we're working on, which I'll talk about when we do the roundtable.
Okay, so that's Margie, so she's full up.
I am full up.
Who would like to talk about some of these other topics? We have grants, design guidelines.
Well, along with grants, Pam, I think we were going to request that the council consider increasing the annual grant of $50,000 to, I don't know, $1 million, I think.
And I can get you the numbers in terms of what we've actually had in terms of requests for the last 5
Yeah,
years.
I mean, based on the number of requests and the dollar amounts, that it would be appropriate. And we felt that
You
they
guys-
were meritorious.
You can do that. As you know, though, we did put that forward when we were talking about the budget for next year, and that was one thing that council decided at this point, trying to manage the budget, that they weren't going to add any more
Oh, they
to
were?
it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. All right.
Michael, do you want to talk about the grants we did this year?
Sure.
And you can mention it, for consideration for next year. We had X amount, $100,000 in requests, and only had 50,000, and we did the best we could, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I'll put Michael next to that. Let's see, design guidelines, who would like to talk about that?
I
David?
would like to talk about it. I can't commit at this time. I might have an obligation that will make me unavailable for that day. So put me down as a second for that, perhaps.
Okay, maybe we can have Dan,
Yeah.
although he wasn't here.
Doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I could see
so-
with Dan, and one of us could.
Can you talk, I can talk to him about that, but, okay, so we'll talk about that. I don't know, I'd like to talk a little bit about, and I will take this, the outreach that we've done with, our brochures, our attending the block party, what you've done. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you did this summer.
And what Michael does with Hoodlum, I think, too.
Pardon?
I think Michael attending the Hoodlum meetings and others attending those is
Yeah,
a key thing.
so maybe Kim can talk about I'll talk about the booths, the ones we had at Western Welcome and at the block party. And Kim, if you just talk a little bit, like 2 minutes, about what you did this summer with the picnics.
Yeah, I maybe just 2 minutes. I have to tell you, I just don't really feel qualified to speak to them about anything because I feel like I'm still the newbie. So
They'll believe you then.
so maybe like 2 minutes on
Okay.
the
And we can
fact
talk
that
about it.
people really enjoyed seeing us at those.
Yeah, okay, I'll talk about the picnic. And you're going to talk about the Hoodlum meetings, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a collective effort, but I'll be glad to mention that we try to have somebody there every month.
Right, and I think that's all you need to mention is,
It's part of our
we're all
outreach.
going, and
Well, that's a pretty full agenda. Do I need to put that together to submit to them ahead of time or anything?
We wrote it down, so
Okay,
it
so you're all
seems like
good.
you have enough to talk about, so we'll definitely
Okay, and-
get that on the agenda.
I'll put this in some kind of order and put how many minutes we have apiece so that we know about how long we can speak and knowing that there'll be some interaction. Okay, great.
Put me last if you need to cut something.
I don't want to put you in the spot if you don't want to. We could somebody else can discuss it. Don't worry about it. We can work on that. I don't want to put you on the spot.
can we get the date confirmed pretty soon so we know
Yeah.
how much
Confirmed.
time we have to prepare?
6:30, December 13th.
But I mean the date. Okay, so that is a final?
At 6:30? Okay. All right. And if anything changes, you'll let us know. The tours, I know I'm asking for this way far in advance. Where are we with our script?
Okay, because I have some notes here to talk about.
Okay.
As you know, Sharon did an incredible script, so when we were doing the tours in Western Welcome Week, I quickly bullet pointed all of it because hers was just a narrative and there's, I needed. So I went back through that and made some changes and did some edits and added some bullet points. And I've sent it to Dan Miller to add some bullet points on architecture. And he's out of town, so we're definitely working on that.
Okay.
Kind of a couple of fun things about that. Have you all heard of the Littleton Leadership Academy that is starting up this year? Pat Cronenberger called me and said they would like to have historic tours done with a group. They're limited to 25, and she said probably June, July, somewhere in that time frame. And the other issue is that Gail Keeley, who is the chair of HLI, met with Sudie Floyd, who owns Outnumbered Gallery, to talk about the art walk. She was really excited about having us do that in conjunction with Art Walk. And she talked to Becky at the city, the event coordinator, and we're meeting with her December 13th to talk about how to move forward and how we can get incorporated into the art walks, which are the first Fridays, I think, in May, June, July, August. So I think this is going to, and I think Dan, of course, since I'm term limited in March, Dan can be involved in that since he did the original tours, and he can take over the HPB liaison on the tours.
Well, I thought Michael was, because he was working with HLI.
Well, that's on landmark.
HLI?
Well, we have landmark designation as well. So whatever you want to do, I mean, that's fine.
Well, because we kind
But
of
I
set it
think-
up that Michael would be.
Okay, whoever is going to.
Would be the chair.
Guys are still in
after
your
you
meeting,
left.
so please speak
With
into your
everything.
microphones,
Oh.
right? Remember, that's important to do.
Yes, sorry. I thought, let's have Michael, because,
Okay.
as your backup, and Dan will work on the script, and, because he's also working with HLI. So let's
Okay.
leave that in place as we, as we planned
all
it.
the HLI things.
And so if we have to be ready the first Friday in May, that means we have to start doing training in April.
So then there's a meeting, if you want to meet, because I think it's important that you be included in this meeting with the city regarding the tours. It is December 13th at 1 o'clock. So hopefully that works.
Would that work for
The
you?
same
Mike?
day as city council.
Same day, okay.
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 Because we didn't talk to Dan, we talked to Michael about being your, your
I
backup.
was just thinking Dan, because Dan has been so involved in the tours. Okay.
Yeah, no, and Dan's an excellent resource, but, so April, we have to think about how many people want to learn to give tours, because it takes some time. Is that something everybody on the board at this point wants to do? Or is others? Only because when we were there for Western Welcome Week, we had 50 people, and we really needed to split tours, so we needed more than 3 people.
And remember that HLI will also participate.
Right, so we need to have some kind of training sessions, probably, maybe you and Dan can split us up if there's HLI, where we go through and do you think we need you to give us a tour and us to listen closely, and then us another tour where we actually take turns talking about the properties? Okay.
And I think,
So we need 2
that's,
sessions.
once we get the script done, and I don't know, since Dan and I have done them before, maybe because I'll still stay involved from the HLI side.
And
you'll
we
be
need
the
lots of tour guides. I mean, I think it would tax the board if we're the only tour guides. If we can get more volunteers, I think that would be great.
Yeah, and I think HLI, I think a lot of them are real excited. So then Mike and I will meet December 13th with Becky at the city.
Okay.
And we'll just
Okay.
keep in mind, and then talk to them about, in April, we'll have 2 sessions. Not that it could be crummy weather, but we really need to be outside in front of the building. Okay.
And I think this meeting is, on December 13th, is more about how the city is going to promote and how the art walk is going to be done and all of that kind of thing, and then how we piggyback. So I think that's going to be exciting.
Okay. Do you want to keep going with HLI awards and designation? Okay.
The landmark designation, I'm going to kind of defer to Mike because he's working on the title guarantee building. You might explain your whole background on I think this is...
Okay.
Well, where you are at this point.
Yeah, we're trying to set up a meeting with the owner of the 2000 West Littleton Boulevard to discuss the pros and cons of that building being included as a landmark building. And Charlie Carroll, thank you, of HLI has been referred to me by Margie, board member Clute, to be the HLI contact for that. So Charlie and I'll tag team on that one and go meet with Mr. Smith, who owns the building. So it was a good contact because it came from Hoodlum one morning when I was there. In fact, Ted and I were there together, and we were approached at the end of the meeting by somebody who actually works in the building and works for the architectural firm that owns the building. So that was a nice contact and nice segue into a possible landmark designation. So I'll keep you posted on that.
That's good to hear. And I'm passing around the list to just make sure it's still current and if there's any openings, if anybody wants to fill in. But I think that's been very positive. Okay. And then
No, I have a couple of it.
Yeah.
Then Bemis Library I've been attending the Littleton marketing meetings really on behalf of the scavenger hunt, but no, the Bemis Library is just turning 51. so they may be a great candidate. However, when I was talking about HLI, Rebecca Cass mentioned that there's been so many alterations to it, I don't know if the integrity is there. So we might have to look at that first, and I don't know, would that be something that's been surveyed, Dennis?
No,
The library?
it has not. It probably was, no, I don't think it was at all. I don't remember seeing it anyplace, actually.
Yeah, so that's something we may have to check out before we pursue that. And then a private residence, Liz Eaton and her husband, they want to designate their private residence. So we have some things in the works, so I think it's starting to pick up.
What is the address of that, the Liz's house?
It's on Curtis, and I couldn't tell you. I think it's on my phone.
Just north of Church.
It's just north of Church.
On the east side. It's a great house.
It has a big porch on it. It's a great house. So that's that. Now, in the Historic Preservation Awards, here again, I'm going to need someone from HPB to volunteer to kind of take over for me on HPB, and I'll work on it from the HLI side. But Rebecca Cast has really wants to work on that. So we have a meeting set on January 10th at 1:30 to talk about the awards. And I'm going to go through all of my records and see what I have. And I may need to call you, Dennis, to fill in who have we already given awards to. So hopefully someone from the board.
Is there anybody interested in the board, be the HLI liaison after Margie?
HPB.
The HPB liaison, HLI.
Historic Preservation Awards. And if you want to think about it, and we can talk about it
Have you got
December.
them to move it up from a year from now?
Yeah.
Oh, this is more
We're gonna
May?
do it in May.
Great. Is there any interest in no one? Okay, so we'll table that for now. Did you have anything else, Mark?
Yes, on Hudlum, I did go to the last Hudlum meeting, and Greg Renke said that he really would appreciate being called ahead of time, that one of us is coming and who it is, so he can put us on the agenda.
Okay.
And I have his phone number, which I can give you here in a second. The other thing that I thought about, since we have different people going each time, is that there should be maybe a record or something about what we talked about so we don't reiterate things. And I don't know if that's a good, so that we're not, like I went through, I talked about the design to the Louthan district guidelines. I talked about the historic tours. I talked about the website and what a great resource littletongov.org is.
No, that makes sense since we don't have one person.
And also I talked about the new facade on Jose's, and they were so excited to hear about that. So I'm just thinking that maybe the person that goes needs to tell the next person what they discussed. I mean, I don't know.
So the next one's December is Dan and Paul, both which aren't here. Okay.
But I think the important thing is that Greg gets called.
Okay, can you give me his phone number?
Yeah, it's right here. I think that's all I have. So next month, hopefully someone will step up and get involved in the awards.
And what do you think, what would be some good ideas of anything else that would be appropriate for them to talk about that we haven't talked about, that you didn't mention?
At Hudlum?
Yeah. Like a recommendation. Does anybody have any recommendations for Dan and Paul for next time?
Well, I did talk about the Louthan Street Design Guidelines, and we were working on it, so I don't know.
You might mention the board vacancies, I would think, so.
Yeah, the board vacancies, that's a great idea.
So we have.
Or the art walk thing.
Yeah, the tours that were, because that's new since
Okay.
last time.
All right.
We will be doing tours in conjunction with the art walk. I think they all should be. And getting back to the awards, if you guys too could be thinking about something you think should be recognized in the Historic Preservation Awards, so that I can take them to the meeting, so we can maybe quickly in December meeting talk about that.
I'll ask him to throw that out. Okay, so I'll call Greg, tell him who's going, and then talk to Paul and Dan and make sure that there's things that give them suggestions of things that they want to talk about.
Yeah.
So in the future, let's see, I'm scheduled, David, you and I are scheduled for January, so we'll coordinate that. And Great.
Did you get his phone number?
Yes. 3737.
Okay.
Yes.
And so, again, all of you, if you think about some of the COAs that we've done, or we haven't done awards for a couple of years, I don't think.
Oh, that's another thing we can do, talk about our COAs. Okay.
And I would offer staff, one thing might be helpful for you is we could bring those to you instead of trying to remember them off your head, like when the COAs and where they were, right? We can bring some information to the board for
That would
you
be
to
good.
contemplate
That's
that.
why I was saying with Dennis, because we don't want to repeat awards that we've already given, and I think I have a running history of awards that we've already done. And Dennis, you might have to help me fill in any holes, and then we can go for it. But that would be good, the list of COAs.
And then if you would give that to Dennis, so it's filed and we can have access.
Right.
Okay, yeah. All right,
And
well,
keep
good.
it up every time.
All right.
Okay. That's all I had.
I think we're covering most everything. One of the things I want to talk about, the marketer here, was these brochures. And these are what we have had at our booth. And the booths that we have maybe planned coming up are the block party and maybe Western Welcome. And possibly if we go do the summer picnic events. The problem is that we don't have a lot of money, I guess, in the budget to reprint any of these, unfortunately.
As we discussed earlier, though, those are city brochures.
Oh, so
we will make more brochures for you to bring to all of those events.
Okay, and so I don't know if we want to look at these. I mean, there's certain ones that I think are really good. And then one of the things we don't have is what the Historical Preservation Board does. And maybe that's an insert or just a sheet or something.
I've never seen this one before.
I haven't either.
Yeah, that's a new one. You're right, I haven't seen
Oh,
that
is
one.
it new?
No,
Well,
it's an older one. It's just,
but-
yeah, it's rare. It's a good one.
I don't think I've
Rare
seen it either.
vintage.
There's a feeling that since we've been doing outreach to the community, that they understand more what we're doing and has had a more positive impression in the community of the Preservation Board and a better understanding of how we help maintain the look and place that's helped the downtown Littleton thrive. So, okay, so we'll try to get those reprinted. We're going to try to see if we can get the sign repaired because we don't have the sign. Try to get it easy up and try to get a table and a table drape so we're kind of outfitted for next year. Round table. Other things board members want to bring up. Nothing else? Okay. Dennis, anything else?
No, it's great.
Anybody else? Okay, so we can go ahead and adjourn. Thank you, everyone, for coming.